Now, Donald Trump, in the meantime, is in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Let's cross to the Swiss Alps resorts. Business editor Stephen Carroll is there. Donald Trump sharing the limelight with environmental activist Greta Thunberg this day.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, while those events are happening over 6,000 kilometres away in Washington, interesting that the focus from Donald Trump's speech today was really around the issue of climate and his accusations levelled at climate activists like Greta Thunberg that they were prophets of doom and we should reject their calls for dramatic action. Whereas Greta Thunberg says that we should be acting faster than we are and that the world is on fire, as she said here a year ago. And as we know that there is more that needs to be done and faster to try and remedy the rising emissions. Now, the World Economic Forum, who first gave that global platform to Greta Thunberg last year, has invited 5 climate heroes, including Greta, back this year. I've been speaking to one of them. His name is Fionn Ferreira. He's an 18-year-old Irishman. He developed a project which removes microplastics from water. And I asked him what he thought of Donald Trump's speech and his comments on climate. Let's take a listen.
That he didn't go through climate issues as much as I had hoped, and he didn't address some of the problems that I was questioning about his policies.
What message are you really hoping that politicians and business leaders here will take home from this year's Davos?
I really hope that they support some creative ideas from maybe young change makers, supporting more grassroots ideas from the bottom all the way up, because I think any idea can really change our world, really shape and really maybe change the whole climate change issue. So because of that, I think they should really look at all ideas.
That's Fionn Ferreira speaking there to me a little earlier, one of the climate heroes at Davos this year. The one commitment to the climate that Donald Trump did make in his speech, that was signing up to the 1 trillion trees programme. That's an international programme aiming to plant that many trees by the end of this decade. It's being supported by the World Economic Forum. There was some corporate welcome for Donald Trump's commitments, the boss of Salesforce notably praising the president for agreeing to sign up to that programme, but plenty of other attendees here at Davos not quite so pleased with what the president had to say on that issue. Now, most of President Trump's speech here in Davos was dedicated to praising the performance of the economy since he became president, saying how much better it was doing now versus before. And this is something that I've been discussing with John Denton. He's the Secretary General of the International Chambers of Commerce. They're one of the biggest organisations representing business around the world. And I asked him if those businesses agreed with Donald Trump's assessment that everything is really great.
What businesses are seeing is actually a pretty modest and probably a little bit lukewarm outlook. On trade, it's not looking too good. Investment, it's kind of not great either. Confidence is actually pretty challenged. The level of volatility that comes around from uncertainty is pretty high. And so if that's as good as it gets, we would probably like to see a slightly different kind of set of indicators. So stronger trade growth, stronger investment, less volatility, more certainty, and actually a pretty clear roadmap about how we're going to deal with some of the big risks that we're foreseeing. I mean, the big risks around climate. I mean, how are we going to actually grapple with the transition?
A lot of smaller companies simply might say it's too expensive for me to make the big changes necessary.
Oh, we're building a tool at the moment, which I'll be launching here, which will enable companies to actually apply a digital application which helps them understand their environmental and carbon footprint, and then shows them and helps them understand how to change that, and also helps them understand other benchmarks against other companies in similar circumstances in their country, in their region, in their local area, in their sector. These are practical tools, and they're actually built to be SME and micro SME friendly. So if you want to do something, there'll be no excuse. And what we find is that more companies want to do something as well.
Pretty strong warnings from the likes of Greta Thunberg here in Davos that things need to happen now. If there are dramatic policy shifts at a government level, carbon taxing, things like that, is business ready to adapt to that?
Well, business has been contemplating how to actually engage in the transition for some time, but it's all been too leisurely. I think what's happening now is that rather than, like we would say, jaw, it's actually time to do stuff. And what we're saying is, for the first thing, is when you even talk about how you get positive market incentives to help companies change, you need to actually address that issue. You need to look at the Financial Stability Board and say, well, why aren't you including climate risk as a cause of instability? Why aren't you actually incorporating that into what you see as the necessity for financial stability? That would send a very clear signal to the way in which the capital markets and financial markets operate, which would incentivize people to actually change. So that needs to happen as well. But also there's a lot of, it's so complicated, it's a conundrum, we want to do the right thing for a lot of companies. Saying the solutions are still 20 years away, but they're not. There are a lot of solutions that are available now.
That's the business point of view there from John Denton from the International Chambers of Commerce. We'll expect to hear plenty more about climate issues during the rest of the World Economic Forum. Francois.
Many thanks. Stephen Carroll reporting live from the World Economic Forum in Davos.